Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come to the floor this afternoon about a topic I wish we didn't have to address. And this is the plague in our country of fentanyl and fentanyl overdoses that so many families throughout this country have had to deal with. And coming from Ohio, we have unfortunately been on the front end of the opiate crisis. We've been on the front end of the heroin crisis, and now we are on the front end of the fentanyl crisis. And I have a picture here of Rachel, who is from Akron, Ohio, who died at 17 years old. Her life was tragically cut short because she took a fatal overdose of cocaine that was unknowingly laced with the synthetic opioid carfentanil. And carfentanil, for those of you who haven't been paying closely enough attention to all of these issues, is 100 times more potent than fentanyl and 10,000 times more potent than morphine. And so we have young, talented, beautiful people, in this case a high school student, who had so much promise, so much life, so much personality. And I speak with her mom often and listen to stories about and see pictures of this beautiful young woman. And now her mom, Sydney, carries on her daughter's legacy, providing peer-to-peer programming at local schools and in the local community. And we failed Rachel. This country failed Rachel and her mom and her family and all of the families across this country. And now we thought we had at one point enough attention on the issue of opioids, on the issue of heroin, now on the issue of fentanyl. And then the pandemic came, and this issue has been on the back burner. And my remarks here today on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, one of the greatest deliberative bodies in the entire world, is to try to bring attention to this issue, to try to scream from the rafters so that we don't have any more Rachels. We don't have any more families that have to experience the heartache, the tragedy, the gut-wrenching experiences that so many families have had to have over the past few years. And this is something that we can do. 80% of the overdoses in Ohio, think about this, 80% of the overdoses in Ohio are from fentanyl. The fentanyl starts in China, it goes to Mexico to get processed, and then it comes over the border. And so as a country, we have to focus, and I will give the Biden administration a credit. We have seen progress in this regard. We have seen progress. We have seen a decrease or an increase in people getting busted at the border, which is appropriate. But we have a long, long way to go. We need an awareness campaign across the country so that young kids who otherwise would make a simple mistake and now it ends their life, that they know, that their peers know, that their schools know. There's not a corner of Ohio, Madam Speaker, there's not a corner of Ohio that I can't go to where I won't meet families who have experienced this kind of tragedy. And it's incumbent upon us, and as one of the co-chairs of the Addiction Treatment in Recovery Caucus, we've been dealing with this in a bipartisan way. We passed the Comprehensive Addiction Recovery Act, the CARA Act, in a bipartisan way. We know that there are so many issues we can fight about. There's so many issues we can argue about here in this body. But I hope and pray that one of them isn't the issue that we need to address collectively here in the United States Congress. And so we need to, I think, begin by going back to the opiate issue, going back to the Sackler family, going back to all the profits that were made off of getting so many millions of Americans hooked on opiates, hooked on painkillers. And you merge that in with a broken economy where there's so much hopelessness in so many quarters in the United States, where so many communities have been disinvested in, deindustrialized, left to rot. And then you have families that are knowingly increasing the amount of opiates, playing with the FDA, going through the loopholes, which is what the Sackler family has done, and they need to be punished to the point where they don't get the deal that they want. Madam Speaker, they don't get the deal that they want, because that's how it's been in the United States. If you're a wealthy corporation, you can get away with just about anything. If you're a rich person in the United States, it almost doesn't matter what crime you commit. You're going to get away with it. But meanwhile, in Youngstown, Ohio, or Steubenville, Ohio, or Portsmouth, Ohio, or Akron, Ohio, it trickles down. And it's been those communities who have suffered greatly. Dayton, Ohio, because of this epidemic. And over the holidays, my wife and I were able to watch an amazing documentary on Hulu called Dope Sick with Michael Keaton, Rosario Dawson, and others that went through the Sackler family approach to painkillers. And it went through, set in Virginia, but Michael Keaton from Western PA, graduate of Kent State in Ohio, they were highlighting Virginia, but this is an issue everywhere, where these good and honest and decent people found themselves getting hooked because of the wealth and profits that one family wanted to earn on the backs of the American people. And so here we are today. We need to make sure that the Sackler families of the world are punished and put out of business, quite frankly. And we need to also make sure that we begin to take the bold steps we need to take to make sure that the Rachels and the other kids and the other people across this country, to the tune of 100,000 deaths last year because of fentanyl. So I believe we need to take a firmer stance. And while I support what the Biden administration has done, we need to go a hell of a lot further. I believe we need to start having a conversation in this country, knowing that China knows that they're sending fentanyl to Mexico that makes its way in the United States, that they need to be punished with tariffs. They need to be punished. They're killing our kids. This is killing our kids. We can't just stand around. We need to take the money from the tariffs, support our border, support the cops who are on the beat in these different communities. We need to put that money towards addiction treatment to make sure everybody can get better if they've got some issue. And we need to grow the economy in these communities. But we can't just stand by and hope this problem goes away, because it's not. It will get worse. And there will be more families, More destruction, more hopelessness, more ruined lives. And as we're trying to compete against China economically, we need to make sure that Rachel and these other young, bright minds are on the economic field playing for the United States of America. That's what this is all about. And so we've got to have a whole-of-government approach. We have a whole-of-government approach when it comes to the pandemic, right? The only way you can have any success is when you have a whole-of-government approach. And this means federal, state, and local coordination. This means coordination with nonprofits, and this means coordination with law enforcement. This means coordination with the Border Patrol. This is about us all coming together, and you can't tell me we don't have the imagination in the United States to figure this out. This is about making it a priority. And so what I'm doing here tonight, and what many activists across the country are doing, are trying to get this back on the front burner. Because other than a few articles in the paper, it's been on the back burner. And we need to make sure we increase the resources necessary to keep this garbage out of our country, or to know who has it the second they bring it in here. And we've got to make sure all our kids are aware that this could be put in cocaine or meth or something else. And that if you have an issue with drugs, that you can actually get the treatment that you need. And that no one's priced out of the market, so that they can get better and get healthy and become self-sufficient and become good citizens and members of society, and off to the races we go to try to outcompete China because we care about our citizens. That's what this is all about. And so you're going to be hearing a lot from me in the coming weeks and months, where we are building a coalition of the families around Ohio and across the country who want to begin to move this issue forward. And I do want to take a minute or two to talk about the power of fentanyl. And I mentioned the carfentanil. But 1 kilogram of fentanyl, 1 kilogram, has the potential to kill 500,000 people. The money that's being made off of this substance will blow your mind, which is why it continues to come over the border from China, from Mexico. And much of the fentanyl comes through the southern border that's being looked at by the cartels. A lot of the China-sourced fentanyl comes through the international mail, and some comes from China through Canada. As I said, fentanyl is responsible for 80% of Ohio's overdose deaths. Roughly 79% of meth, cocaine, psychostimulant overdose deaths in Ohio were from supplies contaminated with fentanyl. The pervasiveness of fentanyl contaminating other drugs has made overall fatality rates for all drugs much higher than before. And we're seeing it across the board. And we have the Stop Fentanyl Act. We have legislation with Annie Custer and others. There's a Manchin-Portman bill in the Senate which permanently makes fentanyl-related substances a Schedule I controlled substance. This is something that we have to address, and we have to address it in a bipartisan manner. And I would just like to say, lastly, Madam Speaker, that there is nothing more inspiring than someone who has been through the ultimate tragedy, which is having to put one of your own kids to rest. There's no greater heartbreak. There's nothing worse that could happen to a parent. And so I'm pledging, and I know other members are pledging, to keep up the fight. Because, as some of these parents have told me, there's nothing left to lose for them. And there's nothing more inspiring than someone who has had their heart ripped out of their body, who live with the pain every day, who wake up in the middle of the night and open their eyes and hope it was a nightmare. Open their eyes in the morning and hope it didn't really happen, that they could walk down the hall and their kid would still be laying in their bed. And these giants, these parents, are taking their pain, they're taking their experience, they're taking their heartache, and they're saying, we got to fight. We can't let this happen to another parent, to another brother or sister, to another family member. And so people like Cindy started Rachel's Angels, which is a group back in Akron, Ohio. And there are so many groups across the country that have sprung up because of these tragedies. And we want to unite these groups, and we want to take the fight to the American people, to Congress, here in the House and in the Senate, and get the resources we need to make sure that these overdose deaths stop, that the companies producing these kind of drugs get punished, that the people peddling this stuff get punished, and that we get the resources we need to keep this garbage out of our country. And so while this may be the first time this year that I stand up and speak on behalf, it will not be the last. And we're encouraging everybody, Madam Speaker, to reach out to their members of Congress, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, and let's get this issue of fentanyl deaths back on the front burner of the agenda here in the United States Congress. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.